Welcome to Goose Creek Studio and the final days of Raymond Vagg's show Rivers here at the gallery. Trying to do a little bit of an experiment here and see if we can use a conversation as a part of the kind of ongoing record of what we do here at Goose Creek. So welcome. It's good to have you here. So I've said this before that the pandemic changed everything for us. It forced all of us to rethink priorities. So Goose Creek's emerging kind of trajectory is to be almost exclusive in terms of the art that we feature in this space, the front part of the gallery, to be specifically with artists that are working at the intersection of faith and spirituality and creative expression. There's no shortage of those people here in Bedford. And trying to figure out how we promote these works, these shows, how do we broaden the general public's understanding of what we're trying to do here, and how we involve the artist and the public in that conversation of this new trajectory. First of all, it's been wonderful having the work here. Absolutely wonderful. I want you to talk about, if you could, the idea of art and healing. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that one of the things that art and exhibitions in particular could be critical in is the healing of the divisions we have today. And hopefully in the conversations that happen around the art that we get people with diverse views talking with each other. Can you talk about your art and healing?
And healing. Well, that's I guess a two-pronged question. Mm-hmm. You know, it's when I'm doing my work, am I healing some aspect of myself? Oh, okay. And does that convey into the work? And when someone views the work, are they moved in that way? Do they sense that? Mm-hmm. For me, art has always been an expression of my spirituality. Mm-hmm. When I go into the studio, I certainly sit down and say a little prayer, so to speak, about what needs to come through me and onto the canvas. And I do believe that, you know, my spiritual belief is that everything we do is spiritual. Mm-hmm. Every aspect of our life is spiritual. And that when I allow that higher presence to move through me onto the canvas, there's something more there than just me and what I've kind of set out to do. Some people might talk about it, about getting in the zone. When there have been times when I've been so absorbed in the work that I kind of disappear. I just disappear. So, and when I'm doing work, I'm thinking about life, my life. That's what, you know, the river series is, the river of life. Mm. You know, the stones that are in the river and the objects that we come across and the places we can rest at times. So I think about the past. I think about the people that have been in my lives, how they've affected me. I think about what's going on in my life now, and I don't think about the past in a way that is, oh, looking back to the good old days. You know, I'm looking at what I gained from those days, and how they've made me the person that I am today, and what's the future for me? What's next? And I think that that is all spiritual and all healing. It's interesting. I just actually, you had a comment when we were talking one day that you enjoyed the show and you were sitting in the gallery and it was very peaceful and calming. And I think that that's conveyed in my work because when I'm doing my work, it's a very peaceful and calming space for me. And then somebody else, just recently, one of my friends, I posted a piece that I had done for a charity event that the art club, Lynchburg Art Club, is involved with. And I posted it, and one of my friends came back with a comment, "What does it mean?" And my always comment to that is, "What does it mean to you?" And my friend's comment was, "Well, the colors are wonderful, and I get this sense of peace and calm when I look at it." So I was like, okay, that is very helpful, you know, that my work is calming to people and peaceful to people. So I think in that way, that is healing. That is healing.
So you said there were two ways to understand healing, and of your intentionality with creating the piece, your history, your experience, and the viewer's experience. I think maybe we could even add a third: is does the healing also in our day and time is critical between people? Can art, or can you envision art that creates that conversation? So the piece isn't healing, but the conversation that the conversation that's fostered becomes the healing moment.
Well, I think we all approach art from our own life experience. So, you know, for me to allow the viewer to have their own experience, that's important to me. And, you know, I think I've shared this story with you before years ago at one of my first gallery openings. Some two people came up to me during the opening, and one person was talking about this particular piece and said, "Oh, this is wonderful. It reminds me." The person was from Vietnam. It reminds me of my home and the light, and it was an orange circle and a white triangle on a reddish background, and I'd taken black and poured it all over it. And he said, it gives me a lot of joy. Well, a little later in the evening, an older Jewish woman came up to me and said, "I hate that piece." I was like, you know, what do you say to that? You know, I'm sorry. But she said, it reminds me of the concentration camps. So there was a little bit of an awakening, a moment of epiphany, maybe, that said, you know, how much control do I have over how somebody views my work? Now, in both those situations, they can both be healing. You know,
Right, sure.
you know, here's this young man that, you know, feels the joy of his home. Here's this person that is remembering what she went through, but she's through it. She's here to talk about it. And so both aspects can be very, very healing for somebody. How much, you know, I always say once I put the brush to canvas, how much control I have over what the viewer thinks about it or experiences. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. Although with, some of the comments that people have, particularly comments like, I find it peaceful and calming, it's, well, that's what I'm feeling when I'm doing the work. So if I can convey that, and that's the only thing I convey to someone, that's okay with me. I think that art has many purposes. I think that pleasure and joy is among my top desires for my artwork, that somebody finds pleasure and joy in that. And I hope that is in some way healing for them. I think that art can have a message, obviously. We have so much art that has social and messages of equality and messages of suffering, and to express those particular feelings, yes, it can be healing. Obviously, to express any kind of emotion that we're having is healing.
So for 12 years, I taught high school. And what I loved about the educational process was you communicated an idea to a group of students, and then you found ways of evaluating, whether it was tests or homework or whatever. You had ways of evaluating your effectiveness at communicating that information. And if it came back that it wasn't being effectively communicated, kids were failing tests. Good teachers don't blame the kids; they blame themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't communicate well enough. So you get a chance to do it over again. The next semester you get a chance to redesign that. So you get a different outcome. One of the frustrations for us is there's no tool like that for the gallery experience. We don't have a way to evaluate did Ray's work communicate what Ray intended it to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It's all left ambiguous and individual. And as a professional, we wonder how effective we're being in communicating that. Or or is art just something that's so different that you leave it to the individual? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. I think there is artwork that can express an opinion, a story, an emotion, and a feeling, and then I think that there's art that leaves space for the viewer to have their own experience. Again, we all come at viewing art. We view everything in our lives from our own life experience. So it's hard to say whether one piece can mean the same thing to every individual that views it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my experience with, you taught for years, and obviously, having gone through college and that whole process, I sometimes think that stifles people's creativity. You're given a objective to accomplish, and in that setting, in that academic setting, which I loved. I loved college. I loved academia. I loved learning. and experiencing things. But as far as my artwork goes, I think that there were times that I felt that the things that I did before I was in artwork and had to conform to whatever they wanted of me were much more powerful than the things that I
Okay,
was
sure,
doing. Yeah.
sure.
So that, I want to say, judgment of someone's art or someone's capabilities or someone's expression is, it's a challenge. You know, it's a challenge for me that you have somebody in authority that you're looking to um, for information, and yet they're judging you. So that, to me, that judgment steps in there, and it's hard to express yourself fully and completely when you're trying to please someone else in that setting.
Right.
Does
Sure.
that
Sure.
make
Sure.
sense? You know?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I know for myself, it took me a while to get over the college experience and get back to the things that pleased me and that I thought were much more of what I wanted to express. I'm not saying that I didn't learn in that that venue, but I think there's something to be said about that conformity.
So you've been. Thank you for that. That was lovely. The You've been gracious as we have been experimenting with our post-pandemic musings about what's next. One of the things I just want to get your quick reaction to, we made the choice post-pandemic not to put labels and not to put prices on things in this space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could certainly be for sale,
Mm-hmm.
but to take marketplace out of this small space, what was just give me your feeling?
Well, I
Because
think,
this is experimental.
yeah, I think that you know, my thought is that, you know, for an artist to be appreciated, there has to be some kind of a monetary exchange. That's our system. Um, for people to say I love your work and not to want to take it home and hang it on their wall is a little disappointing. And I think also it can become a very expensive hobby if you're not selling your work. Um, you know, I think that that's an issue for artists. You know, it's like I want to continue to do my work, but if I'm not selling what I already have and I have to store it, become, you know what I'm saying.
Oh,
Right?
I do know what you're saying. Yeah.
So I think that that's sort of an important part of the exchange. Um, Someone to really appreciate the work and to take it into their home, that emotional, that gratification, that somebody appreciates it, but also that financial part that I can continue with this. You know, fortunately, I can continue whether they're sold or not, but I would like to have my artwork out there and appreciated by other people. So,
I think to put that in context, Mitchell and I both come from and aspire to religious traditions that are deeply skeptical of of marketplace and deeply skeptical of ego.
mm-hmm.
And
You're talking about turning the tables over in the market.
And they have come up, many religious traditions have come up with alternative worldviews and ways to structure life, that those aren't front and center. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying it's a long history, and that's part of the experiment we're trying to figure out, because we're not doing this alone.
Right.
We're not doing this alone, and we don't know that we think we're pretty smart people, but we know that whatever solution we come up with is going to be a healthier solution if it's in conversation with a larger group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of the
So I think there's a little bit of that I'm hearing. It's a little bit of prosperity is a bad thing, because there are a lot of religions that sort of border on that. You know, if you're spiritual, prosperity doesn't matter to you, or there's that. I think that in a lot of people's minds, it's like if you're prosperous, you had to do something wrong to get the money. So I've always come from a place where prosperity is actually very spiritual. I think that there's, again, going back to judgment and people feeling that they don't deserve, the good things in life, or what prosperity brings. And that whole idea of the starving artist never stuck to me. Or it's interesting. I went back to college, later in life. When I said later in life, I was a baby. I was 28 years old, I think, when I started back to college. And, I was established. I had been working for years, and I always had money. And I'd go to Pearl Paint in New York City with my college friends that were, in their late teens, early 20s. And they would be literally counting pennies, to pay for their artwork. And I'd pull out the platinum card and it'd be like, you're never going to be, you're not starving enough. You're not down on your luck. And I was not attracted to that line of thinking, that, the poor starving artist type thing. And I having been a minister and having taught people how to think and not what to think, I think plays a big part of that for me. That,
sure.
That I think that there's a place for prosperity in art, and a message. There can be a message, and an artist can have a particular message and a viewpoint, and have that viewpoint pay them a nice living. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but
I don't know that I have it's just a quandary we have in a place where, for us, our religious affiliation runs in tension with the way the current gallery model is structured. And our question is can those tensions coexist? They're not going to go away, but can they coexist? And that becomes a question for us. It's been surprising how many artists are really comfortable talking about their technical process of painting, and less articulate or less comfortable talking about what they're trying to communicate.
Mhm.
So the idea is in this space, in this small little 20 by 20 space, that the conversation, the focus we're experimenting with is that it's conversational.
Mhm.
And that's what is such a joy when we visited your studio and saw these pieces I didn't know existed, or I'd seen one or two of them on Facebook, but to see the broader scope of them, some unfinished at that point, it was that was the kind of collected vision that we wanted for the space.
Mhm.
You know, that it would slow people down to look and to think.
Mhm.
You know, so you come to a gallery not just to buy a wedding present or a new picture for your living room, but you come to this space to be inspired or be nurtured or be awed.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that that's part of my wanting to allow the viewer to have. I want them to have a conversation with my work, and then I'd like to know what that conversation is. I'd like to share that conversation.
Sure. Mhm.
Um, and um, at that moment, again, like when my friend said to me, "Well, what does it mean?" I want to know what it means to you. Then I can tell you what I was experiencing or feeling doing that work, but I don't want sometimes my vision to obscure your experience, to interfere with your experience. So how do you balance having a vision or a mission or a message with allowing someone to have their own experience? That's a question, that I have. I'm not sure that I have the answer for that quite yet. Um, Doing what I do, it is very personal, and I do work that has a meaning to me, and I allow that to sort of sit on the side and let the viewer experience it for themselves. Um, in my view, I think unless something is, absolute on the canvas, if you have a picture that has Martin Luther King in it, that's about the racial inequality and struggle. Um, Abstract art, like what I do, isn't that on the nose, so to speak. It's again, it just leaves that room for somebody to love it, hate it, be indifferent about it. That's up that's up to you. But I'm going to do what I'm going to do and express what needs to come through, onto the canvas from me.
So, one final thought, just to get your thoughts on. Several years ago, I met an artist that collected ephemera, and I didn't even know what that was.
I don't either. So you're going to have to explain it to me.
Well, she explained it as she collected old magazines and newspapers.
Okay.
She collected old stuff that was often block printed or letter set printed, but it was meant to be temporary.
Mm.
And it was often printed on paper that wasn't quality paper because it was meant to be ephemeral. It would disappear, And I was intrigued by that. Now she collaged it into her artwork and made it permanent, non-ephemeral. But I was intrigued by that idea that we all have closets full of art.
Mm-hmm.
1 minute they're gracing the walls of a gallery, and then next minute.
They're in a.
They're stacked up next.
They're collecting dust in the,
next to the water heater. So how do we begin to think about that? If we were printing a newspaper, we would expect it to go away. Or if we think about worship, whatever tradition, where the sounds and the stories and the food, smells are all consumed, that there's nothing left over. Mm-hmm. What happens next? What happens next? The problem with art and faith has always been that, unlike the music and the food and the stories and the preaching, reflection, the art stayed. Mm-hmm. It didn't get consumed. Its physical presence remained, and then it got valued, But anyway, what do you do with these, especially big pieces? And you're doing more and more big pieces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that is part of marketing oneself. They talk about artists branding themselves and having, a particular piece. When somebody sees it, they go, oh, that's a Raymond Vag, mm-hmm. That's a Picasso, that's part of what I feel I need to do next, get a resume together mm-hmm. and get myself out there. Mm-hmm. And, for me, it's a matter of, what was that movie? Build it and they will come, It's, I'll do my work and it'll find its place eventually. Okay. And I think that place will be where it's appreciated. I think that I'll put it out in such a way that it's not going to be a gallery that appreciates the dollar, but they appreciate what the artist, has done. So hopefully that's what I'm putting out there. Mm-hmm. That's, and it's interesting. I, in doing research for my interview of you, and I found a gallery that has that message, mm-hmm. that mm-hmm. they're, so it's something that whether I ever display there or not, I have absolutely mm-hmm. no idea, but they're out there.
They are out there. You're absolutely right.
They're out there. Mm-hmm. So, and, again, I think for me, well, I come from a place where everything is a spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. We've heard that saying, we're not physical beings having a physical experience, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And if I approach everything in my life from that point of there's a higher power that is working through me, as me, everything will be in place for me. Everything will come together for me. I think that connection for me is, the most important thing. Everything that I do in life comes from that connection. I don't struggle having that connection. I sometimes, I don't want to say feel sorry for people that don't have that connection, mm-hmm. but I wonder how they get through life. Mm-hmm. If you have to rely on yourself alone without having something, whatever you want to call it, universal intelligence, God, eternal being, whatever you want to call it, there for you on your side. And that again is, my experience, I was raised Roman Catholic as a child. I was told that God didn't like me. My experience of the Catholic Church was not very positive. I had the first day of first grade, the nun told me I was stupid. So that was a lot to get over. That was a lot to heal over many, many years. And I had to come to a place of understanding that there is something much greater than I that is not judging me, that isn't condemning me, that is supporting me. And that idea for most people is so foreign. It is just so foreign. They rather choose the vindictive, judgmental, man that sits on a cloud that could send a lightning bolt down to you at any time, but supposedly loves you. So, talk about being schizophrenic. I mean, that's, so that experience of spirituality for people, and spirituality and art is maybe different. I mean, look at how much art was created for the churches. I mean, that was the church was the largest avenue for artists to express themselves at one time. And of course, they had to express themselves within the confines of what the church wanted you to experience. So I think being able to move away from those confines and being able to move away from that feeling of judgment gives you a different level of spirituality in your art.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the work. Thank you for your generosity of spirit.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
So,
I am very grateful and humbled, really, sitting in here and looking at my work so beautifully displayed and so appreciated. So thank you.
so what might be an exciting next conversation is I
thought you were asking. Oh,
no,
you have it already. Oh.
No, I think to explore in a deeper way that tension between prosperity and what we call evangelical poverty. It's not poor because you're forced to be poor. It's poor because it's a choice, and to just explore that and how that has positively and negatively impacted what we do for a living. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject that actually I, taught for many years in our church and in our belief system, and it's a lot of information that I have. So
good, excellent. Then you'll be ready.
Yeah, I'll be ready. I'm always ready for that conversation. I'm always ready for that conversation.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you very much.
All right.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, I enjoyed